Hi everyone, and welcome to my history homework. So for the past few units we had learned about World War II and the Cold War, and then recent history. Instead of talking about something cool in recent history, I wanted to talk about something cool that happened during the Cold War. So today I'm going to be talking about Gail Halvorsen, or more specifically known as the Candy Bomber. Now, Halvorsen was born in Utah in 1920, which means he lived through the Great Depression. Now, during World War II, he got his pilot's license, and that led to him eventually becoming part of the Royal Air Force Cadets. When he was in the Royal Air Force Cadets and finally, got out of training, they decided to put him in Germany under Operation Little Vittles. Now, a little preface, I'm pretty sure most of you know about the Cold War, but at this time, Berlin was divided in two down the middle. There was West Side and then there was East Side. West Side was run and dictated by the US and the UK, so it was mostly free. And then the East Side was run by the Soviet Union. Because the East Side was run by the Soviet Union, it was more poverty-stricken. There were a lot more homeless and hungry people, and the US and the UK knew about this problem. So they decided that they wanted to try and fix it with Operation Little Vittles. In 1948 is when the plan actually began, and the plan was to fly over East Germany, land in their dilapidated airport, and drop off food and supplies to the people inside the city. Of course, the leader at the time, Stalin, was not very happy that, the US and the UK were trying to feed his hungry people that he wanted to keep hungry. So he started to send other pilots, Soviet pilots, to fly after these US and UK pilots. Basically, what would happen is the US and the UK pilots would be flying, and then the Soviet pilot would come directly at them, and it would look like they were about to shoot, but right before they actually touched noses, they would fly over. Many of the US and UK pilots had no idea that they weren't going to shoot until they started doing this almost every day, and they never shot them. So it was kind of clear that their plan was just to distract them and make them turn around, less so than to shoot them down. After this little scare, the US and UK pilots finally understood that they could go through with their plan. So they made the first few drops. These consisted of flour, coal, dried potatoes, dried eggs, milk, and even gasoline. Halvorsen had done these drops a few times, and that's when he started to notice that outside of the barbed wire surrounding the airport, there were children standing there and watching him. They started to speak to him in English. They weren't asking him for anything. Instead, they were saying, "Don't give up on us. If we lose our freedom, we will never get it back." That was the moment Halvorsen knew that these kids understood what he was doing and were incredibly grateful for it. He wanted to reward their silent gratitude, so he pulled out of his pocket his 2 sticks of Wrigley's Double Mint gum that he had gotten from his ration. He ripped both of them in half and put them through the barbed wires. As he handed them to the children, they started ripping them up and sharing them between all the kids. None of them fought for the gum. All they did was take off the wrappers and smell it. After watching that, he promised that he would come back and bring them all gum the next day. He, of course, did not get permission to drop gum the next day, but he did it anyway. Him and his crew all gathered their candy ration and put it together. They had 2 nice handfuls of candy for the children. But of course, a handful of candy is pretty heavy, and they couldn't just give it to the children through the barbed wire. So they need to figure out a way to get it to the children without being suspected that it was them. So they decided that on every piece of candy, they tie a little parachute. At the time, they had 3 handkerchiefs, and he wanted to use these as parachutes. So he tied 3 little bundles together, each with its own little parachute, and got ready for the next day. As they flew over the city, he wiggled his wings, just like he had promised to all the little children, and they all knew it was him. They all shot their hands up wanting candy, and he gently pushed out all the candy out of an escape hatch. The candy gently floated down, but the entire time, Halvorsen was worried that the kids didn't get it. Halvorsen landed, unloaded the flour like he was supposed to, and looked around. He didn't really see any kids with candy, but what he did see were the 3 handkerchiefs waving with seemingly chewing mouths behind them. This continued for 3 weeks with 3 parachutes for every single drop. After the 3 weeks, the base got a letter to Uncle Wigglewings, and Halvorsen got a little bit worried, so he completely stopped the drops for 2 weeks so he wouldn't get in trouble. During those 2 weeks of a break, the crowd only kept getting bigger outside of the airport as more children came wanting candy. After seeing the size of the crowd, they decided one final drop. They all gathered together their rations that they had, and they had kept it. Now they had 6 parachutes to drop. After that final drop, the plane landed at the base, and an officer came to Halvorsen saying that the colonel wanted to see him. The colonel had figured out what had been happening, and Halvorsen had to explain everything. The colonel loved the idea and said, "Keep doing it." Then Halvorsen's squadron went from 1 plane to 10. Now, instead of just 3 little parachutes, they had hundreds going down with every single drop. People in the US heard about this and they wanted to help the children of East Berlin. So many college students wanted to tie the parachutes to the candy that they had. And that is how one man gave hope to the children of Berlin. Thank you so much for watching, and I'm so glad that I got to do these homeworks for 2 semesters. And thank you, Mrs. Hall, for watching all of them. And I'm so glad that I got to have you as a teacher. You're great, and I really do miss being in classes with you and the rest of my class. Thank you so much.